News.
Well, listen, talking of hard nights, obviously world title is the aim. You've got another defence, which we thought it was a bit surprising because thought it might well have gone for an interim maybe. What's the score with that? Because Serrano now, she's messing about saying she's going to only do 3-minute rounds, which of course means probably the belts will be distributed. Where does that leave you?
Well, if Serrano wants to do 12 threes next and no one else is up for it, I'm always up for it. I'm always game, and I'd love to do threes. I think it suits me down to the ground, my style. I'll be able to set up the work, put that pressure on. You know, these 2-minute rounds, a lot of people can do the tippy-tappy running away, and you can do that over 10, but those 12 threes, that gets tiring, and once you're getting hit to the body constantly, hit to the head, setting up those traps, that's when it gets difficult. You can't just stick to that for over 12 threes. So yeah, I'd love to do 12 threes.
But aren't the governing bodies saying they're not going to recognise the 3-minute rounds, in which case you can't fight for belts at 3-minute rounds?
I think in time that'll obviously change. I think once a few more women have done it, contested over it, shown that we can do it and it's entertaining, then, you know, that's when those talks will happen in changing it.
While Raven Chapman, who I love, is willing to fight Amanda on Amanda's terms, 12 rounds, 3 minutes a round, moving forward, she's not in position to do it. She's not in position to force a fight with Amanda. So short of Amanda voluntarily defending her titles against her, I don't see how the fight happens. Raven Chapman, in spite of being WBC silver champion, she's ranked all the way down there at 14, with a good number of fighters ranked ahead of her. The fighter in the most pole position to challenge Amanda seems to be Matchroom in Australia's own Sky Nicolson. She's ranked at number 1. She's WBC interim champion. So for Raven to try and force a fight with Amanda via the mandatory process, it looks like she would have to go through a good number of fighters. Raven Chapman, who is going to be returning to action before this year is out, opposite the ring, Lucy Sedlakova, their rescheduled fight. I have Raven winning that fight.
That's on December 1st. I've broken down that fight already.
And I don't doubt that Raven Chapman means what she says, that she would be willing to fight Amanda Serrano for 12 3-minute rounds if the opportunity were afforded to her. I'm just not sure that's what's going to happen. I get the sense that what might happen is, due to the impasse between Amanda and the WBC who don't want to sanction women's bouts for 12 3-minute rounds, the title may end up going vacant, or the title may end up going to Sky Nicolson. But Amanda's not going to let the WBC boss her around.
She's already the biggest name at this weight. She's already one of the biggest names in the sport. She doesn't actually need the World Boxing Council. The World Boxing Council needs her.
So if they want to play hardball, take the belt from Amanda to give it to Sky or somebody else. They can do that, but it's their loss. Amanda doesn't need it at this point. She's already been undisputed. She's already broken records and been a champion at 7 weights. Amanda's not going to let them boss her around. And what the outcome of all of this could be,
Sky Nicolson might get the title,
provided that she can stay WBC interim champion and stay in the winner's bracket. Sky Nicolson is going to be in action this weekend opposite the ring, Lucy Wildheart, a fighter who's been around the block, shared the ring with a few good fighters, and has only ever lost to naturally bigger women than Sky Nicolson. So it's going to be interesting to see how Sky handles her. And if she wins and stays in the winner's bracket, it's looking like she'll be the next WBC champion, and it's looking like Raven Chapman might end up pursuing her. Seems strange to me that Raven Chapman is not already ranked in the World Boxing Council's top 10, it being that her quality of competition is in many ways better than Sky's, better than Sky Nicolson's. And she does have a lesser version of a WBC title, but she's ranked all the way down there at 14, and Sky is ranked at number 1.
I really can't reconcile that. Raven has fought better fighters comparatively than Sky has.
Sky becomes WBC champion, it won't just be Raven Chapman that comes after her. In the World Boxing Council's rankings, you'll find the names of unbeaten up-and-comers Sophia Leash, Tiaria Brown,
Carolyn Veer, Amina Zidani.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown, and she may find that out the hard way. Becoming champion ain't all it's cracked up to be. There's getting the belt, but then there's being able to keep it. There are a lot of really good fighters, all converging on the women's featherweight division. And beyond the reign of Amanda Serrano, whatever she decides to do moving forward, fighters like Sky Nicholson are going to have their work cut out for them.
Raven Chapman might be one of the fighters that she is so confronted with, even if Raven is currently ranked at 14. And there are a good number of fighters and a good number of fights in between what could be Chapman versus Nicholson. I feel like Raven relishes the opportunity.
She will. There are a lot of really good fights to make in between now and the time that Raven fights Sky Nicholson. If they do end up fighting, we'll see what happens. In men's lightweight news, Bob Arum says that various ailments made the Stevenson fight that way, and he was concerned that Shakur would have to pull out.
I didn't know specifically what was wrong with Shakur because I was out of town. But Dina Duboff reported to me that when he went to see this doctor, and the doctor, various ailments about 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the fight, so I was quite aware of that. It was a shoulder problem that he had. I don't know specifically, but that's what I was told. Not last night, but during the last time that it was happening.
Not everyone is sold that Shakur Stevenson was fighting injured. It seems a convenient excuse for what was another lackluster performance, not dissimilar from what we saw in the Nicotila fight, though on the presupposition that he actually was injured and he was fighting injured, and that's why he looked the way that he looked. It's really no excuse. No excuse in the sense that if you decide to move forward with the fight in spite of your ailments and injuries, you assume the responsibility of whatever happens.
I haven't sold all my stock in Shakur Stevenson just yet. I still believe he's better than what he showed last week. But as far as him being injured, as far as that being an excuse, it really is no excuse.
You accept the responsibility of what happens, whatever happens.
He's a very competitive kid, and so he doesn't train like a real seasoned pro would. Just to accomplish certain things working up to the fight, he makes every training session a battle. What I mean? You can't do that. I think that's a bad lesson he learned from Terrence Crawford. I think Terrence Crawford, when he spars, he's an older fighter, but Crawford is a tremendous competitor, and when he spars, he lets it all hang out.
You can still believe that Shakur S. Stevenson is one of the best young talents in the sport today. Acknowledging that he laid an egg in his last fight, two things can be true at the same time.
You're judged by your last fight, but he's a young guy, and if in his next performance, which I expect will be a scintillating performance, people will forget last night. If he was reaching the end of his career, I think people would say, whoa, maybe he doesn't have it anymore, that kind of thing. But he's not. He's a young guy, and he's just beginning to reach his potential.
And as stated, I haven't sold all my stock in young Shakur S. Stevenson. I still believe he's one of the toughest fights for anyone and everyone at or around these weights. I would still pick him to beat Gervonta Davis, as strange as that might sound to all of you.
Still pick him to win the Gervonta Davis fight. The Gervonta Davis fight that Shakur Stevenson says, I think that's the biggest fight in the world.
No, it isn't. It's not even the second or the third or even the fourth biggest fight in the world. And it's a fight that he's miles away from. Though if by some chance it were to happen and they made it, I would pick young Shakur to win that fight. I think it's the biggest fight in the world. I think that when it happens, it needs to be promoted and put out there like that. I think that me and him is two of the best fighters in the world. And honestly, I just feel like it should be worldwide. That'll be the best fight in boxing right now, if you ask me.
Shakur here and now doesn't have the same following, social media following, that Ryan Garcia had ahead of his fight with Gervonta Davis. And that went a long way towards helping to sell that fight to that younger audience. Shakur, he doesn't have that.
Given how he looked in his last fight, was a very, very poor advertisement. So before it becomes about Stevenson versus Davis, he needs a strong showing, a much, much stronger showing than what he showed the last time out. Though even then, I don't think a fight between Shakur and Gervonta would be the biggest fight in the sport, the biggest fight in boxing.
It's an exaggeration. Any interest in that fight would be domestic interest. It's not the kind of fight that garners global attention. Not now, anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I think 35 is the weight, Stevenson said. I think me and him naturally is smaller guys. I think I'm naturally a 135-pounder. He's big as far as, like, thickness, but he ain't like no super tall motherfucker, so I think that he'll fight at 135 for a while, too. I don't think that he's planning on going up.
I don't think he is either. I think the plan all along has been to hang on to that WBA regular title until such a time as the full title becomes vacant, at which point Gervonta will be elevated to full WBA champion at lightweight. I don't think he's going up to super lightweight.
Would, in effect, make a fight between him and Shakur as Stevenson a unification match for what would be the WBC and WBA titles. 60-40, honestly, why would I not take it, Stevenson said. Man, I ain't trying to get into the business, but like I said, once again, he's the biggest superstar in the sport, so give me the call and I'm ready to talk. The real measure of Gervonta Davis's celebrity will be tested in his very next fight. While he may have put up robust numbers with a popular young guy in Ryan Garcia in their last fight, we know what his numbers looked like before that. And what are his numbers going to look like now, moving forward? There are interesting fights out there for him, like a fight with Frank Martin or a fight with Edwin De Los Santos. I could go for that now that Edwin has fought Shakur.
But those aren't big fights. They're not big fights. You're not going to do 1 million or over 1 million. I don't really think you could do 500,000 buys with those fights. They're interesting, but they're not that big.
You see that among American fighters more so than some others. They're always exaggerating.
Talk too fucking much.
Shakur, as Stevenson himself, acknowledged that, saying, I talk so much shit, I gotta eat whatever criticism comes with a bad performance. And, you know, it's not Shakur himself saying that his shoulder was injured. It's not Shakur himself making these quote-unquote excuses. He acknowledges that it was a bad showing, it was a bad performance, and he's got to get his comeuppance.
He's got to do better.
I knew before I came here, Stevenson told a group of reporters regarding the tactical way he approached De Los Santos. I told people already, but like I said, I can't make no excuses, man. It is what it is. I talk so much shit, I've got to eat whatever comes with it, man. And in spite of the piss-poor showing, and in spite of how he looked and all of that, a big part of the reason I would still favor Shakur to beat Gervonta Davis is because he can fight negative. It's because he can win boring.
He's a pure boxer, and that's the tactical advantage that the pure boxer has over the boxer-puncher, the counter-puncher. And that's what Gervonta Davis is, a counter-puncher, and a smaller man than Edwin De Los Santos. You say to yourself, well, look at how Shakur looked with Edwin.
But look at Edwin. Edwin is a taller, longer fighter with speed and power, but he's a taller, longer fighter than Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis is shorter, stumpier, not as much wingspan, not as much ring coverage as Edwin De Los Santos.
That's right.
It just wasn't me, man, Stevenson said. I had a lot going on. I ain't gonna make no excuses. It was a good fight, just a bad performance, and not up to my standards. So like I said, I don't make excuses. I own up to everything. I was supposed to put on a better performance tonight.
Edwin was able to trouble Shakur Stevenson because he's got a bit of height, he's got a bit of length, speed, and power. So it's a little harder for Shakur Stevenson to get within striking distance of this guy and stay in the clear, avoid the punches.
With Gervonta, who is a strong puncher, he's also a shorter guy with shorter arms. Thus, Shakur Stevenson can stay within striking distance of him, staying out of range of Gervonta's punches.
Because Gervonta is shorter than Shakur, he needs to be close to him to land some punches, whereas Shakur, he can box him long range from the outside because he is a bit taller and he is a bit longer. They've both got speed.
but he can box Gervonta Davis long distance, long range, whereas with Edwin De Los Santos, it was difficult because Edwin has a bit of height, he has a bit of length. The height differential and reach differential, the wingspan, it does matter, especially when a guy's got speed and power of his own.
And Gervonta Davis, he doesn't throw that many punches in a round. He waits to counter, waits for guys who are going to step into their punches to catch them coming in. That's not Shakur.
I mean, remember what it is people are complaining about in Stevenson versus De Los Santos, that Shakur was too cautious, too careful, on the move, and spent too much time on the outside.
How do you think that would affect Gervonta's counter-punching? How do you think that would make him look?
It was former two-division champion and Hall of Fame inductee turned analyst Timothy Bradley who stated, Gervonta Davis will get exposed if he faces the right guy like Shakur. Stylistically,
Shakur's style doesn't do Gervonta's any favors. Even if Shakur's style isn't always pleasing to the eye, that doesn't make it any less effective.
it's very effective. Tank is going to get exposed soon, said an amped-up Timothy Bradley to Sean Zeidel of FightHype.com. He gets in there with the right guy, Shakur Stevenson, he's gonna get exposed. Gervonta Davis has been primarily fighting guys that come forward, guys that step into their jab to bring over other punches, guys that bring the fight to Gervonta so he doesn't have to go out there and find them. Whereas with Shakur, it would be the opposite. You'd be fighting a fighter who can move lateral, fight on the back foot.
He's a southpaw like Gervonta is a southpaw, but he's taller and longer and younger.
Things get hot in there, and he can't have his way. You can beat him. He would definitely fold under pressure, said Timothy Bradley in reference to Gervonta Davis.
May not seem that way now after Shakur's lackluster showing. Everybody has one, and everybody's piling on because it's convenient. Boxing fans and their knee-jerk reactions.
We are all guilty of it to some degree, like how when Teofimo Lopez looked poor opposite the ring, Sandor Martin, I didn't think he would be able to beat Josh Taylor, but you live and you learn. In light of this, I still like Shakur's chances against Gervonta just based on the styles and the physical dimensions of the fighters. That for a shorter, stumpier fighter with shorter arms who doesn't throw that many punches in a round and relies primarily on counter-punching, the other man making mistakes, Shakur could be a hard man to hit and a hard man to beat.
And we're not talking about a barn burner. We're not talking about a gunfight. That's not the aesthetic this fight would have. This would be a chess match.
A thinking man's fight where Shakur S. Stevenson is keeping distance, keeping space, pot-shotting Gervonta from the outside, making it hard for him to get within striking distance. I still like Shakur to win.